You really let this account get away from you, didn't you? Honestly, I don't know how you sleep. It was 7,052 on a Tuesday morning, and my mother-in-law was sitting at my kitchen table with my bank statement spread out in front of her like a crime scene. Not her statement. Mine. The envelope was already torn open, the little plastic window flap folded back, the pages flattened under her reading glasses. She hadn't knocked. She never did. She had a key to our front door and a habit of letting herself in before I'd even had my first coffee. And that morning she'd apparently decided that the mail piled on the side table was hers to sort. My name is Joelle. I was 31 that winter, living in a narrow brick semi in Kanata, with my husband and our daughter, and I had spent 3 years telling myself that my mother-in-law meant well. That's the phrase I kept in my pocket like a worry stone. She means well. Diane means well. My husband said it so often it stopped sounding like words and started sounding like weather. She tapped the statement with one manicured nail. There's $140 here at some place called... What is this, a coffee roaster? In a month? On a single-income household? We were not a single-income household. I'd been on parental leave on EI, which she knew and which she liked to forget whenever it suited the story she was telling. I was standing in my own kitchen in my husband's old hoodie, my daughter on my hip, and I felt the exact thing I always felt around this woman, which was small. Caught. Like a teenager who'd snuck the car out. That's the mail, I said. It's addressed to me. It was sitting open on the counter. It had not been. I was tidying. You should thank me. This place is a disaster. She slid the statement an inch toward me. The way you'd return something distasteful. I raised my boys to keep a clean house. My husband was already gone. He left for the office downtown by 7:15 every day, and so he never once saw any of it. The entering, the inspecting, the soft little remarks that landed like paper cuts. By the time he got home, she'd be back in her own bungalow in Barhaven with a casserole story, and I'd be the one who'd had a hard day, who'd seemed off. That morning, after she finally left, I stood at the window and watched her back, her Buick out of my driveway, careful as a surgeon. And I thought, she opened my mail. She actually opened my mail. I didn't know yet that opening someone else's mail is an offense under the Canada Post Corporation Act. I didn't know a lot of things yet. But something in me, standing at that window with cold coffee, finally went quiet and still and started paying attention. She hadn't always been like this. Or maybe she had, and I'd just been too in love and too tired to see the shape of it. When my husband and I bought the house 4 years back, we were short on the down payment. Ottawa prices had run away from us, the way they ran away from everyone our age. And Diane offered to help. $40,000. A gift, she called it, with a smile, in front of his whole family at Thanksgiving, the turkey still steaming. And then quietly, 2 weeks later, at the lawyer's office, it turned out it wasn't a gift. It was a contribution, and she wanted to be on title. A small percentage, just to protect everyone, she said. My husband signed before I'd finished reading the page. He always did. I should have seen it then. The way she'd given us something so she could be inside the walls of it forever. After that, the key, she framed it as practical. What if there's an emergency? What if the baby's sick? What if a pipe bursts in February? My husband had a spare cut for her at the Home Hardware without asking me. I remember the little brass key going into her purse and the feeling in my chest like a drawer being closed on my fingers. Then the visits. At first they wore the costume of help. She'd drop off a lasagna I hadn't asked for and happened to reorganize my pantry while she was at it, lining up the cans label out like a grocery store. She folded laundry I'd left in the basket and texted my husband a photo of the pile with a little caption, "Found this. No rush." She watered plants that didn't need watering and then mentioned to him, casually, that I seemed to be letting things slide. And every single time my husband had the same 3 words, "That's just Mom." If she showed up uninvited during our anniversary dinner because she was in the neighborhood and she lived 25 minutes away, there was no neighborhood. That's just mom. If she commented on the baby weight I hadn't lost in front of his brother, that's just mom. Those 3 words were the soundtrack of my marriage, playing low under everything, and I'd learned to stop hearing them. But the mail was new. The bank statement was new. And in the weeks after, I started noticing a pattern I'd been too foggy to catch. She was always around money. My money. Our money. It started with the joint account. When our daughter was born, my husband, in a sleep-deprived fog, had added his mother as a contact on our checking account, in case anything happened to us. He told me it was just an emergency thing. What he didn't tell me, what I found out later, was that she'd somehow ended up with online access. View only, supposedly. So every coffee, every grocery run at the Loblaws, every $12 at the Tim Hortons drive-thru, she could see it. And she did see it. And she made sure I knew she saw it, in the gentlest, most maternal voice you can imagine. You spent $200 at Costco. For 3 people. As if a Costco run that lasts a month is a moral failing. Then there was the RESP. We'd opened a registered education savings plan for our daughter when she was born. The way you do. The way every anxious Canadian parent does. Chasing the government grant. Telling yourself you're being responsible. Diane had offered to manage it. She had time, she said. She was retired, she'd worked at a bank branch for 30 years. She knew about these things and I clearly didn't. My husband handed it over the way he handed over everything that had to do with her, and I let it go, because I was drowning in a newborn and freelance bookkeeping clients and a husband who traveled to Toronto twice a month for work. And one less thing on my plate sounded like mercy. That was my mistake. I'm a bookkeeper. Numbers are the one thing I'm actually good at, the one room in my life I'm not small in, and I had handed the numbers to her. The conversations I wasn't part of started around then too. One Sunday at her place over a roast, she leaned toward my husband and said, "Sweetheart, have you thought about putting the household finances under one person? Joelle's so overwhelmed, and money stress is the number one thing that breaks up young families." She said it like a public health announcement. She said it like she loved me. I wasn't overwhelmed. I was running a small bookkeeping business out of my dining room with a baby asleep in a bouncer, reconciling other people's books to the penny while my own mother-in-law painted me as a woman who couldn't be trusted with a debit card. "Maybe she has a point, Joe," my husband said that night, not even looking up from his phone. "You've seemed kind of scattered." Scattered. That was the first crack. I lay awake that night staring at the ceiling, replaying every comment, every label, overwhelmed, scattered, letting things slide. And I realized they weren't random. They were building towards something. They were a case. Then I found the texts. My husband left his phone on the bathroom counter one morning while he showered, and it lit up, and I'm not proud of it, but I looked. There was a thread with his mother going back months. Photos of my house. The recycling I hadn't taken to the curb yet. A sink with 2 mugs in it. Our daughter's toys spread across the living room rug in the middle of an afternoon of play, captioned, "Is this normal?" I worry about the environment she's growing up in. The environment. My daughter's environment. There was another one that stopped my heart. I've been thinking, maybe the smart thing is for me to take over the mortgage payments directly and restructure things. For stability, we can talk about title. Title, restructure, take over. That's when I understood it. The whole shape of it. All at once. The way you understand optical illusion the second it flips. She wasn't being a difficult mother-in-law. She wasn't even just controlling. She was running a slow, patient, sweet-voiced campaign to make my husband believe I was a financial liability so that she could fold our house, our accounts, our daughter's future, all of it, back under her own name. She'd given us $40,000 4 years ago so she could spend the rest of her life taking the whole thing. And the cruelest part, the part that kept me up that night with my jaw aching from clenching it, was that she might win, because the one person who should have stood between us my husband, was holding the door open for her. The humiliation didn't happen quietly. It happened at her own dining table, at the big family Thanksgiving in October, the one she hosted every year because she'd never once let anyone else host anything. There were 14 of us, his brother and his brother's wife, a couple of cousins down from Pembroke, an aunt and uncle, the whole loud branch of the family. I'd brought a pie and a salad and my best smile. I'd dressed our daughter in the little corduroy dress Diane had bought, because I'd learned that small surrenders bought small peace. Halfway through dinner, between the turkey and the pie, my mother-in-law tapped her wine glass with a fork. "I just want to say something," she began, and the table went soft and warm and attentive, because everyone loved her, because she was charming, because she made the gravy from scratch. "We all care so much about this little one." She gestured at my daughter in the high chair. "And I think, as a family, we have a responsibility to make sure she's set up properly." My stomach dropped through the floor. She reached down beside her chair and brought up a folder, an actual folder. And she started, gently, so gently, with her reading glasses perched on her nose, listing things. The respondents, which she said was lower than it should be, implying I'd been raiding it, which was a lie. She was the only one with access. The irregular spending on our joint account. A printout of our mortgage, and a remark about how young people today overextend themselves. She had a chart. She'd made a chart. "I'm only raising this because I love you all," she said, looking right at my husband. "And I think it might be time for me to step in and manage things properly, before it becomes a real problem, for the baby's sake." The room went quiet. His brother stared at his plate. The aunt from Pembroke looked at me with a kind of pity that made me want to crawl out of my own skin. And my husband sat there and nodded slowly, processing, gathering her data, like a man being walked through a sensible business proposal. Nobody defended me. He didn't say a word. And then Diane delivered the line that burned itself into my bones. She folded her hands and said, "Sometimes love means stepping in when a mother's in over her head." That was the moment she tried to take it all. My home, my name on my own front door, my daughter's future, my dignity, in front of 14 people over pumpkin pie. And that was the moment I stopped crying. I never started, actually. That was the thing she'd been counting on and didn't get. She wanted a reaction. Tears, a raised voice, something she could point to and call unstable. She wanted me to make her case for her. So I gave her nothing. I smiled. I said, "What a thoughtful offer. Let's talk about it properly, with all the documents, when we're not all so full of turkey." I cut another sliver of pie. I asked the aunt from Pembroke about her hip surgery. And under the table my hands were perfectly steady, which surprised even me, because something cold and clear had taken over, and it wasn't anger exactly. It was arithmetic. On the drive home, our daughter asleep in her car seat, my husband finally spoke. "Mom's just looking out for us. And honestly, Joe, maybe we have been a bit chaotic with money." Chaotic. I looked out the window at the snow just starting to spit against the glass, and I didn't say anything. Because I'd realized something colder than anger, and it had to do with him, not her. She was running a campaign. Fine. But a campaign only works if the other side never campaigns back. So I started. The next morning, after he left for work, I did the first thing I should have done years ago. I called my friend, a woman I'd known since college, who'd gone on to work as a paralegal at a family law firm downtown. Her name's Amara, and she's the most unflappable person I know. And when I finished telling her everything there was, a long pause on the line, and then she said, very calmly, "Joelle, I want you to write down everything I'm about to tell you. First, the bank." I drove to my credit union that afternoon with our daughter bundled in her snowsuit, and I sat down with an advisor and I asked, plainly, who had access to my accounts and how. The view-only access my mother-in-law had wasn't quite as view-only as my husband believed. She'd been added as an authorized contact in a way that, frankly, never should have been approved, and the advisor's face when she pulled it up told me everything. I opened a brand new checking account and a TFSA in my name alone, redirected my EI deposits and my bookkeeping income into it, and I requested a full printed history of the joint account in the RESP going back 2 years. I didn't close anything yet. I didn't tip my hand. I just opened a quiet door of my own. Second, the RESP out. This was the part that made my hands shake, but not from fear anymore. When the statements came in, I sat at my dining table at 11 at night with a cup of tea going cold, and I did what I do best. I reconciled it, line by line, and there it was, 3 administrative withdrawals over 18 months, small enough not to trigger alarm, transferred to an account that, when I traced it, was hers. Not enormous. A few $1,000s total. But it was our daughter's education money, and it was sitting in my mother-in-law's savings, and there was a paper trail with her name on every line of it. Time-stamped and dated and clear. She'd been so busy building a story about me being careless with money that she'd left her own fingerprints all over the actual theft. Third, and this was Amara's idea, the mail. I'd mentioned, almost as a throwaway, that Diane opened my mail, and Amara had gone very quiet and then said, "Joelle, that's a federal offense. Kanata Post Act. Have her do it again. On camera." So I bought a video doorbell and a small visible camera for the front hall, the kind half the houses on my street already had. Nothing hidden. Nothing strange. I told my husband it was because of the porch pirate package thefts that had been all over the community Facebook group, which was true, that was happening, and he didn't think twice. And then I waited. It took 9 days. On the 10th, the doorbell chimed on my phone while I was at the dentist with our daughter, and there she was, my mother-in-law, letting herself in with her brass key at 9:40 in the morning. No one home, no emergency, no reason. The hallway camera caught her walking straight to the side table, sorting through the mail, slipping a letter from the credit union into her purse, and then, this is the part that still makes me cold, going to the little desk in our front room where I kept the household binder, photographing pages of it with her phone and rearranging the contents before she left. Time-stamped. Dated. Clear. And then I did the thing she would never in 1,000 years have expected. I called her in my sweetest voice and I invited her over. "I've been thinking about everything you said at Thanksgiving," I told her, and I let my voice go small and grateful, the voice she liked best. "I think you're right. I think we need to sit down, just the family, and get everything organized properly. Can you come Thursday morning? I'll have all the documents ready." There was a pause on the line. A long, curious, hungry pause. "Of course, dear," she said. "I'm so glad you've come around." Hooked. But before Thursday, there was one conversation I had to have first, because the comment section of my own life had been screaming one thing at me for 3 years, and I'd finally heard it. My mother-in-law was never the only problem. The man who handed her the keys was. That Wednesday night, after our daughter was asleep, I sat my husband down at the kitchen table, the same table she'd sat at with my torn open mail, and I put one single page in front of him. The respect statement, with the 3 withdrawals highlighted in yellow, and the destination account circled. "That money went to your mother," I said, "from our daughter's education fund." While she was telling the whole family I couldn't be trusted with a debit card. He stared at it. He started to say it. I watched the words form. "That's just Mom. There's probably an explanation." And I held up my hand. "I'm going to say this once," I said, and my voice didn't shake, and I practiced it in the shower so it wouldn't. "I have spent 3 years being made small in my own home, and you have spent 3 years calling it weather. That's just Mom. I'm done. On Thursday, your mother is going to walk in here expecting to take over our lives, and instead she's going to sit down across from the truth. And you have one decision to make before then. You can sit on my side of that table or on hers. There is no chair in the middle. He didn't speak for a long time. And then, very quietly, my husband, who I'd written off, who I'd stopped expecting anything from, put his head in his hands and said, "She took Nora's money." "Yes. Show me everything." So I did, and for the first time in 4 years, I watched him actually see his mother. It took him until 2 in the morning, and somewhere in there he started crying. This big quiet man crying at the kitchen table over a binder of bank statements, and I didn't comfort him, because I didn't have it left in me, but I didn't gloat either. I just let him sit in it. He'd earned the sitting. Thursday morning, 9:30. Right on time because she was always on time. Her brass key turned in our front lock. Except this time it didn't. I'd had the locks changed Wednesday afternoon. The little electronic keypad beeped once, access denied, and there was a pause, and then the doorbell rang, and I opened it slowly, smiling, our daughter on my hip. "Oh," I said, "we updated the locks." "Porch pirates, you know how it is." Something flickered across her face, just for a second, before the warmth came back over it like a curtain. "Of course," she said, stepping inside, scanning the hallway out of habit. The side table was empty now. The desk binder was gone. The house was spotless and minimal and gave her nothing to grip. My husband was sitting at the kitchen table. He hadn't gone to work. She saw him and her face did a small, complicated thing, because he was supposed to be downtown. He was always downtown. And the script she'd written for this morning didn't have him in it. "I made coffee," I said. "Sit down. You wanted to organize the finances? Let's organize them." She sat. She set her purse on the floor. She folded her hands and started in. Smooth as ever. "Now, I really do think the simplest thing is for me to take over the household banking, and we restructure the mortgage so it's stable, and..." I slid a folder across the table to her, the same gesture she'd used on me at Thanksgiving. I'd thought about that a lot, actually, mirroring it. "Before we restructure anything," I said pleasantly, "I thought you'd want to see what I've already organized." She opened it. The first page was the RESP statement, the 3 withdrawals highlighted, the destination account, her account, circled in red. Her face stayed composed. She was good. 30 years at a bank branch had taught her how to keep her face still while looking at numbers. "Those were administrative," she said. "Reinvestments. You don't understand how these accounts work." "I'm a bookkeeper," I said. "I understand exactly how these accounts work. That's not a reinvestment. That's a transfer to your personal savings at a different institution. I have the matching deposit records." I turned the page for her, helpfully. 3 of them, totaling $4,100 of your granddaughter's education money. The room was very quiet. My husband was watching his mother now with an expression I'd never seen on him in 7 years. Not anger, something worse for her. Something like the moment a child realizes a parent has been lying the whole time. "And since we're sharing documents," I said, and I picked up the remote and turned on the TV in the next room. "I thought you'd want to see this too." The screen lit up with the hallway camera feed. Her, Tuesday before last. Letting herself in with her key, no one home. Walking to the side table, going through the mail, slipping the credit union letter into her purse, photographing the contents of my household binder. "You recorded me," she said, and for the first time her voice had an edge, a real one, the sweetness gone. "In your own house." Without telling me. "In my own house," I agreed. "Which you entered without permission. You opened mail addressed to me and removed it." I let that sit. "Amara, my friend, she's a paralegal, tells me that opening someone else's mail is an offense under the Canada Post Act, and taking it is theft, so is the $4,100. So that's 2 things now, isn't it?" She turned to my husband. This was her last card, and I knew it, and so did she. "Are you going to let her talk to me like this? Your own mother? After everything I've done for this family?" The down payment, the $40,000. And my husband, my quiet husband who'd spent 4 years saying that's just mom, looked at her and said, "You took Nora's money, Mom." 5 words. The whole house seemed to settle on its foundations. I was protecting her, she whispered. I was protecting all of you. You're not equipped. No, I said, and I stood up, because I wanted to be standing for this part. You weren't protecting anyone. You were positioning. You gave us $40,000 4 years ago so you could spend the rest of your life owning us. And when that wasn't enough control, you started building a story that I was the problem, so you could fold our whole life back under your name. The RESP. The mortgage restructure was going to be the last. I've been watching it happen for months. I just stopped pretending I couldn't see it. I slid one final page across to her, a letter on a law firm's letterhead. Amara's firm, drafted that week. This is what's going to happen, I said evenly. You're going to return the $4,100 to the RESP by the end of the month. We're refinancing the house. The appraisal's already booked, and we're paying out your contribution in full, with interest. So your name comes off title, and you have no further interest in this property. Your access to our accounts has already been removed. You can check. It's done. And you are not to enter this home again without an invitation. If you do, given everything in that folder, I'll have no problem involving the police. I'd rather not. I'd rather you got to be Nora's grandmother. But that's up to you now, not me. My mother-in-law looked at me like she was seeing a stranger. And maybe she was. The woman she'd built her whole campaign against. The scattered one, the overwhelmed one, the one who'd let things slide. That woman had never actually existed. She'd been a character my mother-in-law wrote, and I'd been too tired to refuse to play. You've turned my son against me, she said finally, gathering her purse, her dignity coming apart at the seams. No, my husband said before I could. He stood up too. You did that yourself. The day you took my daughter's money, she left. I didn't watch from the window this time. I just listened to the front door close behind her and the engine of the Buick start, careful as ever, and back out of my driveway for the last time as a person with a key. It wasn't a clean fairy tale after that. It rarely is. She returned the money, wired it back 2 days before the deadline, no note. The refinance went through in February. Her name came off the title, and a part of me that had been clenched for 4 years finally unclenched in the registry office while I signed. We did family therapy, my husband and I, on a months-long wait list like everyone in this country. And it was slow and awful and worth it. He had a lot to answer for, and I made him answer for it. And he did, which is the only reason there's still an us to speak of. My mother-in-law and I have a careful, distant peace now. She sees Nora on scheduled visits, in daylight by invitation, and she's never once opened my mail again. She's polite. I'm polite. The $40,000 and the $4,100 and the brass key are all gone, paid back and changed out and accounted for, the way I account for everything now, to the penny, in a binder she will never touch. People ask me, when I tell the story, what the moment was. The locks, the cameras, the folder, and it's none of those. The moment was the kitchen table on a Wednesday night, when I put one yellow highlighted page in front of my husband and made him choose a chair, because she was never going to stop on her own. But she was only ever as strong as the door he kept holding open for her. I changed the locks on the house, but the real lock I changed was the one on him. The first night after the refinance closed, I stood in my front hall, my name and his on the title and no one else's. And the house didn't feel cleaner exactly or quieter. The baby monitor still crackled. The dishwasher still ran. But for the first time in 4 years, when I turned the deadbolt at night, I knew exactly who could open it. And it was only us. For a long time, I thought the danger in my house was my mother-in-law. It wasn't. The danger was the door I kept letting her hold open. Diane didn't take our daughter's education money in one bold theft. She took it the same way she took everything, a little at a time, after years of me deciding it was easier to stay quiet than to make a scene over a rearranged pantry or an opened envelope. Every small surrender I made was a brick she stood on. That's the part I can't pretend away. The $4,100 left Nora's account because, somewhere along the line, I taught Diane that there would never be a consequence. What changed wasn't luck. It was 3 things I had to grow into, in that order, because none of them works alone. The first was simply deciding what was right and refusing to bend on it. That my daughter's future was not negotiable. That being polite was never going to be the same as being good. I'd confused keeping the peace with keeping my values, and they are not the same thing. A clean hallway is not a clean conscience. The second was using the one tool I actually had. I'd handed Diane the numbers because I was tired, and I'm a bookkeeper. Numbers are the room I'm strongest in. The day I stopped reacting with my feelings and started reconciling line by line, the whole scheme came apart, because the truth leaves a paper trail and lies usually don't survive a careful reading. I didn't outshout her. I outthought her. I let her keep talking while I kept counting. The third was the hardest, and it's the one nobody warns you about. Knowing the right thing and even knowing how to prove it still left me standing in my own kitchen, terrified, with shaking hands. The grit to actually put that yellow highlighted page in front of my husband, to change the locks to say the words out loud and not take them back. That came last, and it came slowest. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's doing the brave thing while your hands are still shaking, which mine were the entire time. If I could tell you one thing, it's that the locks were never the point. I changed the deadbolt, sure. But the real lock I changed was the habit of treating my own quiet as kindness. Diane was only ever as strong as my willingness to look away, and my husband was only ever as weak as the door he kept holding. The moment I stopped being a character in someone else's story and started keeping my own honest record of the money, of the boundaries, of what I would and would not allow under my own roof, the whole thing turned. Not because I got harder, because I finally got clear.